The diplomatic chamber of Meridian Station fell silent as another warrior collapsed. Lord Krell, a Vreth champion standing 3 meters tall with muscles like steel cables, staggered backward with sweat dripping down his face. His massive arms trembled as he stepped away from Princess Elara of House Luminara. She remained perfectly still, hovering slightly above the ground where he had attempted to lift her just moments before. Princess Elara was small by most standards, barely 1.6 meters tall, but something about her strange energy signature made her weigh as much as a starship anchor. The assassination attempt on her home colony had left her partially paralyzed. She could not walk without assistance from someone strong enough to carry her. This was why the coalition had gathered its finest warriors here on this neutral station. They believed that brute strength would be enough to solve her problem. Ambassador Helix stood near the observation window, checking his datapad with a growing sense of concern. He gestured slowly to the next candidate in line. A Nexarii warrior with glowing crystalline skin stepped forward confidently. His people were known for their ability to manipulate gravity fields with special implants built into their bodies. Surely he would succeed where the Vreth champion had failed. The Nexarii warrior approached Princess Elara carefully. He activated his gravity implants, creating a subtle field around her body. For a moment it seemed like it might work. The air around the princess shimmered slightly. But then the warrior's face twisted in pain. He fell to one knee, overwhelmed by the strange force field that surrounded the princess. His implants sparked and buzzed. Within seconds he had to retreat, backing away with his hand pressed to his chest. Ambassador Helix sighed deeply. This was not going well at all. The princess watched all of this with sad violet eyes. She said nothing, but her disappointment was clear to everyone in the room. By the evening, 12 champions from different alien species had attempted to lift her. 12 warriors had failed. There was a Kolthan warrior with enhanced muscles from genetic modification. He had failed. There was a Zukai knight with ancient fighting techniques passed down through thousands of years. He had failed too. There was even a machine warrior, a being of pure metal and technology whose strength could crush stone. Even this mechanical warrior could not lift the princess without his systems shutting down. The coalition's pride lay shattered across the marble floor of the diplomatic chamber. Warriors from proud civilizations, each one believing they were the strongest, each one certain they could succeed. And each one had fallen short. Some of them looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few looked simply confused, unable to understand how they could fail at something so seemingly simple. Princess Elara sat in a special floating chair that had been brought to the station just for her. The chair was made of materials from her home world, designed to support her unique physiology. She stared out the large observation window at the endless darkness of space beyond. Her small hands gripped the armrests of the chair tightly. She whispered something in her native language, words that sounded like music and sadness mixed together. It was a prayer perhaps, or maybe just a resignation to her fate. Ambassador Helix called an emergency meeting with the other coalition representatives. They sat around a large table in a private conference room, arguing about what to do next. Some wanted to bring in more warriors from even more distant worlds. Others suggested using mechanical lifting devices instead. One representative, an elderly Trell named Counselor Vex, suggested something different. "We need to change our approach," Counselor Vex said slowly. "Strength alone is not the answer here. The princess is not a heavy object to be moved. She is a person with a unique condition. Perhaps we need someone who understands problems differently." Ambassador Helix looked at the elderly alien with confusion. "What do you mean?" "The human colony workers," Counselor Vex said quietly. "They are known for solving problems with innovation instead of pure force. Perhaps one of them could help where the greatest warriors have failed." The other representatives looked at each other in silence. Using a human to help solve this crisis seemed almost insulting to them. Humans were not known for their physical strength. In fact, most aliens viewed humans as relatively weak compared to other species. But none of the coalition's greatest warriors had succeeded. What did they have to lose? Ambassador Helix made a decision. He would find the human workers aboard Meridian Station and see if any of them were willing to attempt what the mighty warriors could not accomplish. It was a desperate move, perhaps even a foolish one. But desperation had set in. The princess needed help, and the galaxy's elite had all failed. In the lower maintenance decks of Meridian Station, far below the diplomatic chambers and conference rooms, a human named Owen was working on a broken thermal regulator. He had no idea that above him warriors were failing. He had no idea that an alien princess sat in disappointment while ambassadors argued about what to do next. He simply worked with his hands, fixing machines as he had done for many years. Owen had lost his legs in an industrial accident 5 years ago. Now he wore prosthetic legs made of advanced materials. The prosthetics worked well, and Owen had learned to move around the station's lower decks with surprising speed and efficiency. He was good at his job. He understood machinery in a way that few others did. He could take apart a broken system and put it back together better than it was before. He had no idea that his life was about to change completely. He had no idea that a young aide named Beth would soon appear in his workshop with an unusual request. He had no idea that he would be asked to do something that the greatest warriors in the galaxy had failed to accomplish. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for Owen. And sometimes the most unlikely person is exactly the right person for the job. Owen was deep inside a broken thermal regulator when Beth found him. The machine was old and complicated, and it had stopped working 3 days ago. The entire lower section of Meridian Station depended on this regulator to keep the temperature stable. Owen had been working on it since early morning, his prosthetic legs steady beneath him as he bent over the machine's internal components. His hands were covered in grease and dust. A small work light hung above his head, casting sharp shadows across his face. He was concentrating so hard on the problem in front of him that he did not hear Beth approach at first. She stood in the doorway of the maintenance workshop for a full minute before Owen finally noticed her presence. "Can I help you?" Owen asked, not looking up from his work. He assumed she was just another station worker who needed something from the maintenance department. "Are you Owen?" Beth asked. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with short dark hair and an official-looking badge on her uniform. Owen recognized the badge as belonging to the diplomatic staff. "Last time I checked," Owen replied with a slight smile. He pulled out a small crystalline component from the regulator and examined it carefully. "But I have to warn you, I'm pretty busy right now. This machine needs to be working by tomorrow morning or a lot of people in the lower sections will start complaining about the cold." Beth stepped into the workshop and closed the door behind her. She looked nervous, like she was carrying news that she was not sure how to deliver. Owen finally put down his tools and turned to face her directly. "What's going on?" Owen asked. He could see that something important had brought this young diplomat down to the lower maintenance decks. People from the upper levels rarely came down here. They preferred to stay in the clean, climate-controlled areas near the diplomatic chambers. "We need your help," Beth said. "It's about the princess." Owen laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not mean-spirited, just the laugh of someone who found the idea ridiculous. "I fix machines, not diplomatic incidents," he said. "If your princess has a problem, I'm sure the coalition has people who can help her. Important people. People who actually do important work." "We do have people," Beth said quietly. "We have the best warriors in the entire galaxy. But they have all failed." Owen's expression changed. His curiosity was sparked now. "Failed at what?" Beth explained the situation as quickly as she could. She told him about Princess Alara and her inability to walk. She told him about the assassination attempt on her colony. She told him about the 12 greatest warriors who had tried and failed to lift her. She told him about how the coalition was embarrassed and desperate. "And you want me to do what exactly?" Owen asked. "I'm a human. I'm not even close to being as strong as these warriors you're talking about." "That's exactly why we want you," Beth said. "The warriors have failed because they are trying to use pure strength. Maybe we need someone who thinks about problems differently. Maybe we need someone who understands how to work with broken systems and find creative solutions." Owen looked at his prosthetic legs for a moment. He understood something about being broken and finding ways to work around it. He understood something about adaptation and problem solving. His accident 5 years ago had taught him that strength was not always about muscles and power. Sometimes strength meant finding another way. "This is crazy," Owen said. But even as he said it, he was already removing his work gloves and wiping his hands clean on a nearby cloth. "Will you try?" Beth asked hopefully. Owen hesitated for only a moment. "Yeah, I'll try. But I'm warning you, if this does not work, I have a lot of work to do on this regulator." 20 minutes later, Owen stood outside Princess Alara's quarters on the upper levels of Meridian Station. He felt distinctly out of place here. The corridors were made of smooth materials that looked expensive and delicate. The air smelled different from the lower decks, cleaner somehow, with hints of exotic perfumes and flowers. Everything about this place made Owen feel like an outsider. Ambassador Helix met him at the door. The ambassador was a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. He looked skeptical about Owen's presence here, but he said nothing. He simply gestured for Owen to enter the princess's quarters. Princess Elara was sitting in her special floating chair when Owen walked in. She looked up at him with surprise and curiosity. Owen was human, and humans were rare aboard Meridian Station. Most Coalition members had never seen a human up close before. A human? Elara said, her voice carrying a musical quality that was pleasant to hear. Afraid so, Owen said. He felt a little nervous, which was strange for him. Look, I do not know what I am supposed to do here, but the aide seemed pretty desperate. So I came. Elara smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. It was the first real smile she had shown anyone in many days. At least you are honest, she said. Owen relaxed a little. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from the princess. They began to talk. Owen told her about his accident, about losing his legs, about learning to adapt and rebuild himself. As he talked, Elara began to open up too. She told him about her home colony and the attack that had hurt her. She told him about how half of her body was now synthetic, rebuilt using advanced technology from her world. She talked about what it felt like to be broken and reassembled, to be different from how she was before. The conversation went on for almost an hour. By the end of it, Owen and Elara had found something unexpected. They had found understanding. They had found connection. Two broken people talking about what it meant to be reassembled. Could you try to lift me? Elara asked finally, her voice quiet and hopeful. Owen took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I will try. Owen stood up slowly and looked at Princess Elara carefully. He studied her the way he would study a broken machine before attempting to repair it. He looked at how she was positioned in the floating chair. He observed the way her energy field moved and shifted around her body. He noticed how the light seemed to bend slightly when it touched her skin. I am going to approach this differently than those warriors did, Owen said thoughtfully. They tried to use pure strength. They tried to overcome your weight with muscle and power. But that is not going to work. I need to understand the problem first. Elara watched as Owen moved closer to her chair. He was not intimidating like the warriors had been. He moved carefully and with respect, like someone who understood what it felt like to have limitations. Can I touch your arm? Owen asked politely. I need to understand how your weight is distributed. Yes, Elara said, extending her small arm toward him. Owen gently took her arm and felt its weight. He moved it slowly, understanding how the force field around her shifted and changed. He noticed that her energy signature was not uniform. Some parts of her body seemed heavier than others. The synthetic parts seemed to interact with the energy field in specific ways. Owen had spent 5 years working with machines. He understood weight and balance and leverage in a way that most people did not. He understood how to move something heavy by finding the right angle, the right position, the right point of contact. This was not about strength. This was about technique. Okay, Owen said after studying her for several minutes. I think I understand now. Stand up for me. Just try. I will help support you. Elara stood slowly from the floating chair. Owen positioned himself beside her, not in front of her. He placed one arm around her back and took her hand with his other hand. But he did not try to lift her immediately. Instead, he adjusted his grip, moving it slightly, finding the exact position that would distribute her weight most effectively. Owen thought about his prosthetic legs. They were not real legs. They were machines. But he had learned how to use them in ways that made them work better than real legs sometimes. He had learned that limitation could teach you things that strength alone never could. Now I am going to try, Owen said calmly. He bent his knees slightly, keeping his back straight. He used the strength from his legs and his core, not just his arms. He used the leverage points he had identified. He used technique and understanding instead of just raw power. And then, slowly and carefully, Owen lifted Princess Elara. She gasped. It was a sound of surprise and relief mixed together. For the first time in weeks, she felt held instead of burdened. She felt supported instead of as a problem to be solved. Tears formed in her violet eyes. How did you do that? Elara asked, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. You are not a problem to solve, Owen said gently as he held her. You are just someone who needs help. It is different. The warriors, they saw you as a weight to overcome. They saw you as a challenge to their strength. But I see you as a person who is going through something difficult. And helping a person is different from lifting a heavy object. Owen carefully carried Elara across her quarters and set her down gently on a soft chair by the window. He sat down beside her and they looked out at the stars together. Over the following days, Owen became a constant presence in the princess's life. He carried her from her quarters to the negotiation chambers. He walked with her through the corridors of Meridian Station. He supported her when she stood before the coalition representatives. But more importantly, he listened to her. Owen spoke to Elara not as a princess but as a person. He asked her questions about her life, her dreams, her fears. He told her stories about his childhood on the colony worlds. He talked about what it had been like to lose his legs and then discover that losing them had taught him important things about himself. Elara opened up in ways she never had before. She talked about the loneliness of diplomatic isolation. She talked about the pressure of being a princess, of having to represent her entire house and colony. She talked about how the assassination attempt had shaken her confidence, made her feel vulnerable in ways she had never experienced before. "I thought strength meant power," Elara told Owen one evening as they sat watching the stars. "I thought a strong person was someone who never needed help. But being around you, I realized that is not true. You are strong because you accept help when you need it. You are strong because you have learned to work with your limitations instead of being destroyed by them." Owen smiled. "I learned that the hard way," he said. "When I lost my legs, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be useful again. But then I realized that useful does not mean the same thing for everyone. I'm useful as a mechanic. I am useful as a problem solver. And now I am useful to you." The other knights aboard Meridian Station watched this relationship develop with confusion and then gradual understanding. Some of them seemed resentful at first. They had failed where this human had succeeded. Their pride was wounded. But slowly, something changed in how they thought about the situation. They began to see that Owen was not defeating them through greater strength. He was teaching them something different. He was showing them that helping someone was not about conquest or dominance. It was about understanding and respect. Lord Krell, the massive Vreth warrior who had been the first to try and fail, approached Owen one day. He watched as Owen effortlessly carried Elara through a corridor. "You have shown us something we did not understand," Krell said slowly. "Something important." Owen nodded respectfully to the great warrior. He did not say anything, but he understood what Krell meant. The warrior was beginning to see that true strength was not always about muscles and power. Sometimes true strength was about compassion and understanding. Sometimes true strength was about knowing how to lift someone up when the weight of the world is crushing them down. Word spread through Meridian Station like ripples across water. The human mechanic and the alien princess. People talked about it in the cafeterias and the maintenance corridors. They whispered about it in the diplomatic chambers. By the time the final negotiation session began, almost everyone aboard the station knew that something extraordinary was happening. The Coalition Council gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, a massive chamber with high ceilings and walls made of transparent material that looked out into space. Representatives from dozens of different alien species sat in specially designed chairs, each one accommodating the unique physiology of their particular race. Ambassador Helix stood at the front of the chamber, preparing to hear the final statements before the peace agreement would be signed. But there was something different about Princess Elara when she entered the chamber. She stood taller than she had before. Her eyes were brighter. Her energy field seemed stronger and more stable. She was not being carried. Owen walked beside her, his hand gently supporting her arm, but she was moving under her own power. This alone caused murmuring among the assembled representatives. The princess approached the speaking platform at the center of the chamber. Owen remained near the back, but his presence was felt. Elara took a deep breath and began to speak. "I came to this station believing that strength meant power," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I believed that the strongest warriors were the ones who could defeat their enemies and overcome any obstacle through sheer force. But I have learned something different during my time here. I have learned that true strength means understanding. True strength means innovation. True strength means compassion." She paused and looked toward Owen. "The greatest warriors in the entire galaxy tried to help me. Warriors from species known for their physical dominance. Warriors who had won countless battles and conquered many worlds. But they all failed because they were looking at my problem the wrong way. They saw a burden to be overcome. They saw a weight to be defeated." Elara's voice grew stronger. "Then a human came. A human from a species that most of you consider to be relatively weak compared to your own civilizations. This human succeeded not because he had more muscles or more power. He succeeded because he understood something that the warriors did not. He understood that helping someone is not about domination. It is about understanding the problem differently. It is about finding creative solutions. It is about seeing the person, not just the burden." The chamber had gone completely silent. All eyes were on the small alien princess and the human man who stood at the edge of the assembly. "Humanity has shown me this truth," Elara continued. "While other species measure strength in physical dominance, humans measure it in adaptation and empathy. Humans have faced countless challenges because they are relatively weak by your standards. But instead of giving up, they have learned to think differently. They have learned to work together. They have learned to solve problems in creative ways. Ambassador Helix leaned forward, listening intently. He had heard many speeches in his long career, but this one felt different. This one was changing something fundamental in the way he thought about strength and power. I stand before you today to tell you that humanity must be included in all major coalition decisions, Elara said firmly. We reject the idea that their voices should be ignored simply because they are not physically dominant. We reject the notion that strength can only be measured in muscle and firepower. I propose that we establish formal human representation in the Coalition Council. I propose that we create official positions for human advisors and problem solvers in every major department. The chamber erupted into conversation. Some representatives looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few nodded slowly as if they were beginning to understand what the princess was saying. Coalition leaders who had never thought about humanity as anything more than a minor colony species were suddenly forced to reconsider their entire understanding of what made a civilization valuable. Over the next several hours, debate raged through the assembly hall. Some representatives argued that humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, too different from coalition standards. Others pointed out that humanity's differences were exactly what made them valuable. They brought new perspectives. They approached problems in ways that the more advanced species had never considered. Finally, Counselor Vex, the elderly Trell who had first suggested consulting a human, stood to speak. I have watched this galaxy for many cycles, the old alien said slowly. I have seen great powers rise and fall. I have seen civilizations that were physically superior destroyed by their own arrogance. But I have also seen something else. I have seen that sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest wisdom. Sometimes the person we overlook is exactly the person who can teach us what we most need to learn. The counselor looked directly at Owen. This human has taught us that lesson. And I believe he has much more to teach us if we are wise enough to listen. By midnight, preliminary agreements for human inclusion in major coalition decisions had been drafted. The documents were not perfect. There was still resistance from some quarters. But the door had been opened. Humanity's place in the galactic community had changed fundamentally in a single day. The other knights approached Owen after the session ended. They came one by one, representatives from the warrior cultures that had failed to help the princess. Krell, the massive Vreth champion, was first. He extended his four-fingered hand in the human gesture of respect. You showed us something, Krell said simply. Something we had forgotten. Thank you. Other warriors followed. A Kolthian warrior named Sren. An Exarii knight named Zis. A Zukai sword master named Taleth. Each one acknowledged that Owen had taught them an important lesson through his actions. Owen received their respect with humility. He did not feel like a victor. He did not feel like he had defeated anyone. He simply felt like someone who had done what needed to be done and, in the process, had helped others see things in a new way. News of what had happened on Meridian Station spread throughout Coalition space faster than light. The story of the human mechanic and the alien princess became legendary. In diplomatic circles, people began to speak about it differently. They began to understand that sometimes the most powerful strength comes from the most unexpected places. They began to realize that accepting help from others is not weakness, but wisdom. And on Meridian Station, Owen and Elara watched the stars together, knowing that they had changed something important in their galaxy. Not through conquest or dominance, but through understanding and compassion. The night before Princess Elara's departure, Owen found her on the observation deck of Meridian Station. She stood at the edge of the transparent wall, looking out at the vast darkness of space. Her small silhouette was framed against the stars, and for a moment, Owen simply watched her without speaking. He understood that she was thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was about to change. I knew you would come here, Elara said without turning around. She could sense his presence the way she had learned to sense many things since meeting him. I come here when I need to think. Owen walked over and stood beside her. They looked out at the stars together in comfortable silence for several minutes before Elara spoke again. The coalition has made a decision, she said. They want to establish a human relations office. It will be a formal department dedicated to improving understanding between humanity and all the other coalition species. They believe that humans have much to teach us about problem solving and adaptation. Owen nodded, waiting to hear what was coming next. He could sense that there was something more important that Elara wanted to say. They have asked me to lead this new department, Elara continued. But I told them I would only accept on one condition. That I could choose my own team. That I could bring in people who truly understand what this work means. She turned to face Owen now, and her violet eyes reflected the starlight. I have nominated you as the primary cultural ambassador for the Human Relations Office. The Coalition has already approved it. They want you, Owen. They believe that you are exactly the kind of person humanity needs representing them in the highest levels of galactic government. Owen felt his heart skip in his chest. This was not something he had expected. He had spent his entire life as a simple mechanic, working in the lower decks of space stations, fixing broken machines. The idea of becoming an ambassador, of sitting in diplomatic chambers and speaking to the leaders of the galaxy, seemed impossible for someone like him. Ilara, I do not know if I can do this, Owen said honestly. I am not a diplomat. I do not have the training or the experience. I am just a mechanic who lost his legs and learned to adapt. I am not someone who should represent an entire species. Ilara took his hand gently. That is exactly why you should do this, she said. You do not need training to understand people. You do not need experience to know what it means to be broken and to rebuild yourself. You have something that no diplomat in the Coalition possesses. You have genuine understanding. You have compassion. You have the ability to see problems differently. She paused, looking out at the stars again. The old way of thinking is dying, Owen. The galaxy is changing. We are learning that strength is not just about power and dominance. We are learning that the smallest voice can carry the greatest wisdom. You have shown us this truth. Now the galaxy needs you to continue teaching it. Owen looked at his prosthetic legs. He thought about the accident that had taken his real legs from him 5 years ago. He thought about how he had been devastated, how he had believed his life was finished. But then he had learned to adapt. He had found new ways to work, new ways to move, new ways to be useful. I will do it, Owen said finally. Not because I think I am qualified, but because I understand what you are saying. I understand that broken things can be fixed. I understand that limitations can become strengths. I understand that understanding matters more than dominance. Ilara smiled and squeezed his hand. I knew you would say yes, because that is who you are. You are someone who sees what needs to be done and does it, no matter how difficult it might be. Over the following hours, Owen and Ilara talked about what the future would look like. They discussed the structure of the new Human Relations Office. They talked about which other humans should be brought into the diplomatic corps. They made plans for how to bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the Coalition. Beth found them in the early morning hours, still talking and planning. She brought official documents for Owen to sign, making his position as cultural ambassador official. Owen signed them with a steady hand, though his mind was racing with the enormity of what he was about to undertake. As the sun of the nearby star began to rise, painting the observation deck in shades of gold and orange, Owen and Ilara made their way to the docking bay where her ship was waiting. The vessel was sleek and beautiful, built with materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. It represented a technology far beyond anything humanity had yet achieved. The docking bay was full of people. Coalition representatives had come to see the princess off. Ambassadors from a dozen different species stood in formal positions. But there were also regular workers and maintenance crew members. There were humans and aliens standing together, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Lord Krell stood at the front of the assembled group. The massive Vreth warrior bowed respectfully to the princess, a gesture that surprised Owen. Warriors of Krell's status did not usually bow to anyone. You have changed us, Krell said to Ilara. You have shown us that there is wisdom in places we were not looking. This will not be forgotten. Ilara embraced the great warrior, and then she turned to Owen. For a moment they simply looked at each other. No words were necessary. They had already said everything that needed to be said. I will contact you as soon as I reach the Coalition capital, Ilara said. We have much work to do. Together. Owen watched as Ilara boarded her ship. He watched as the vessel rose through the station's atmospheric shields. He watched until it became nothing more than a bright point of light disappearing into the vast darkness of space. Behind him, Beth placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you ready for this? She asked. Owen thought about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about the broken thermal regulator that had seemed so important just weeks ago. He thought about how one conversation had changed everything. He thought about how sometimes the greatest victories do not come from legendary warriors or great powers. Sometimes they come from ordinary people who are willing to hold each other up when the weight becomes too much. Yes, Owen said, turning away from the observation window. I am ready. Around him, humans and aliens stood together in the docking bay. They were not conquerors and conquered. They were not dominators and dominated. They were partners, learning from each other, building something new together. And in the vast darkness of space, that made all the difference. That made everything possible. That was the foundation upon which a new galaxy would be built. Not through force or dominance, but through understanding and compassion. Not through the triumph of the strong over the weak, but through the recognition that strength takes many forms, and the greatest strength of all is the strength to lift others up. Owen looked at the faces around him, human and alien alike, and he smiled. The future was uncertain, yes. There would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in his life, Owen believed that the future could be something truly beautiful.